I am a 24-year-old male, and this incident occurred a few years ago when I was around 21. It was shortly after my birthday in December, during a cold spell with snow on the ground from a recent snowstorm. At the time, I was living with my parents. My mom, who isn't fond of driving in the snow, asked me to drive her to the gas station to pick up some cigarettes for both her and my dad, as well as a few other items they needed. Since I didn't have anything else to do at the time, I agreed. I grabbed my keys and followed her to the car, feeling the biting cold air against my face. The temperature must have been in the teens, making the road conditions extremely slippery due to the snow. This detail becomes important later in the story. The nearest gas station was only about 5 minutes away from our house, but due to the treacherous roads, it took us closer to 10 minutes to reach there. Once I parked the car, my mom got out and headed inside the store. From where I was parked, I could see her standing in the line leading up to the register. Wanting to stay warm, I kept the car running, not wanting to endure the cold without any heat. While waiting for my mom to finish, I occupied myself by browsing on my phone. Around that time, I noticed a black truck pulling into the parking spot right next to my car. This struck me as odd since the parking lot was empty, and there was no apparent reason for them to park so close to my spot. However, I dismissed it, assuming they simply wanted to be as close to the entrance as possible, considering the freezing weather. Initially, no one got out of the truck, but I only noticed this when I looked up and saw my mom walking out of the store, making her way back to the car. Curiosity piqued. I glanced over to the truck's passenger side window and saw a figure seated there, facing my direction. When my mom opened the car door and got in, she asked me what I was looking at. I told her about the truck that had parked a few minutes before she approached the register, but no one had exited. At first, she thought they might be waiting for someone else from inside the store, but when I mentioned seeing a figure in the passenger seat looking at us, she began to share my unease. She urged me to back out and leave, assuring me that we had nothing to worry about once we drove off. As soon as I put the car into reverse and started backing up, the truck's passenger door swung open, colliding with the side of my car. A tall, muscular man emerged from the truck, standing there after the door made contact. I hit the brakes immediately upon feeling the impact, and the man threw his hands up, staring in my direction. Confused and unsure of how to react, since I had never been in an accident before, I sat there with my mom beside me, both of us witnessing that the door hadn't opened until we had already started moving. The man slowly approached my window and stood there. I cracked the window slightly, apologizing and explaining that I hadn't seen the door open as I was backing out. For a brief moment, he didn't say anything, but then he asked me to roll down the window a bit more, claiming he could barely hear me. Knowing it was quiet in that area, and that I wasn't speaking softly, I knew his request was unfounded. I told him I preferred to keep it cracked as I didn't want cold air filling the car. This seemed to anger him, and he began to speak more aggressively, insisting I roll down the window further. Again, I declined, and this is when things took a dark turn. Without warning, the man struck my window forcefully with his hand. Startled, I immediately recoiled and rolled up the window. My mom was shouting at me to back out and leave, but I was afraid of injuring the man in the process since he was standing right next to my car. The man continued striking my window several more times before attempting to punch it. It became clear to me at that point that if I didn't get my mom and myself out of there quickly, this man would definitely harm us. I noticed the cashier inside the gas station, seemingly aware of the situation, as he appeared to be on the phone, presumably with the police. However, I couldn't wait for them, as the man continued to pound on my window and now started kicking my car door. It was as if he had flipped a switch and lost control. I told my mom to hold on as I put the car into reverse again and sped out of there, narrowly avoiding the man by mere inches. I pulled completely out of the parking spot, but the man ran in front of our car and slammed his hands onto the hood. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do, while he stared right at me. Finally, I turned the wheel, maneuvering the car around him to the best of my ability, and quickly drove away. After that, I thought it was over, but as we approached a stoplight on the road, I saw headlights fast approaching from behind. As the vehicle closed in, I realized it was the same truck with the man inside. There seemed to be another person in the driver's seat whom I hadn't noticed before. Alarmed, I informed my mom, who panicked and called my dad, updating him on the situation. Although we were still about 10 minutes away from home due to the road conditions, we knew we couldn't reach there before these men attempted to ram us off the road or worse. My dad advised my mom to head back towards our house, while he would try to meet us halfway in his truck. We agreed that this was our best option since I couldn't turn around and head back to the gas station, unsure if the police had been called or not. When the traffic light turned green, I pressed on the gas pedal and accelerated, not being particularly cautious as there were no other cars on the road at that time of night. A few times, the car slid on the icy road, and I knew a single wrong turn of the wheel could lead to losing control. However, I refused to slow down, determined to keep ahead of our pursuers. After driving for a few minutes, we spotted headlights up ahead on the opposite side of the road. I assumed it was my father, and as we got closer, we could make out a truck beyond the lights. To my surprise, the truck was still following us, keeping pace. Considering the road conditions, I observed my father cut across the road's median and come to a stop off to the side. As we approached, I decelerated and pulled over. The truck continued trailing me, and as I came to a stop, the same man from before, who had been in the passenger seat, exited the truck and started advancing towards us. The driver opened his door, but both men froze upon hearing my father's voice. "Both of you better get back in that car and drive away before I put a bullet in both of you," my dad warned, stepping into the light cast by our car's headlights. He had his 9mm pistol aimed directly at the man's head as he stood next to my car. I watched as the two men hesitated momentarily, then reluctantly backed away towards their truck. The man spoke briefly to my father, acknowledging his fortunate arrival, and then laughed before hopping back into the truck, which quickly reversed and sped off in the opposite direction. My dad approached my window and asked if both my mom and I were okay. I replied, trembling, that aside from being terrified, we were fine. Shortly afterward, my dad escorted us back home to ensure we weren't followed. I still have no idea what those men's intentions were or why the man acted so aggressively. All I know is that if I hadn't reacted the way I did to protect my mom and myself, I hate to think about what those men might have done to us.